Excellent. Thank you and welcome to our final panel of witnesses for today's hearing. If I could ask each of you to please state your name and position title and then swear either the oath or the affirmation. Start with you, Mr. Doherty.
Matthew Doherty. I'm an executive member of the EcoTransit Public Transport Advocacy Group, and I will swear the oath on the Bible. I swear that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Thank you.
My name is Roydon. I'm a member of EcoTransit. I take the oath. I swear that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Thank you very much. And would you like to start with a short opening statement?
Yes. Okay. I thank the committee for the opportunity to speak on behalf of our community group and other advocates about transport in this part of Sydney that I hold very, very dear. We want to highlight the importance of extending the Sydney Trains heavy rail from Leppington to West Sydney Airport and the Aerotropolis at the lowest cost possible. That is, important transport planning principles are at stake here, and we need to get, at its most basic, bang for our community buck. I'll also flag here that, as an aside, I find it quite criminal that project proponents in New South Wales are busily creating facts on the ground that we can't come back from. And by that, I'm referring to the tunnelling that is taking place and the bridges that are being built in the greenfields of Western Sydney. But the main point that I want to bring home to the committee is the necessity for extending the Sydney Trains heavy rail line from Leppington to the West Sydney Airport. And it's critical for creating an efficient transport network. As a local resident, I remember when it was a 10-minute drive down to Ingleburn before we could access a half-hourly service on a city-bound train. Utilising existing infrastructure, though, the delivery of the South West Rail link to Leppington, together with the quadruplication of the East Hills Rail line, has been a boon for local communities. And I regularly take that train, and it's 22 minutes to get from Glenfield, an outer suburban station, to Walleye Creek, an inner city station. 22 minutes using those outer tracks. And we can deliver good services for this new section of Sydney by building on this existing infrastructure. We have the bones of a great system here, but it's been dramatically underfunded, and there needs to be massive investment in simple signalling improvements, and the extension will provide direct and high-capacity links between the Aerotropolis and the wider Sydney Trains network, which includes Parramatta Central Station and the existing airport. This Sydney rail extension will enhance accessibility, reduce travel time, and alleviate road congestion, which is essential as the region grows. However, to fully realise these benefits, we need additional infrastructure at the new airport, particularly parallel tunnels for the airport and Bradfield stations, as the current metro tunnels are designed, not unlike elsewhere in the network as well, to be unusable for the existing Sydney trains. The second issue beyond that extension that I really want to highlight as well, I think, is the crying need for system-wide resilience. We do get indicators of that often throughout our experience, and it was less than 2 weeks ago that there was a breakdown at Central, and that I'd also put down to underinvestment as well. If there is a breakdown in either one of the two major components of our rail system, the heavy rail or the metro rail, at least in this, if the airport stations were connected with the existing system, in the event of a metro breakdown or vice versa, there would still be options for new arrivals at the Badgerys Creek Airport to access the wider network. So system-wide resilience is a really essential aspect of this proposal as well. So EcoTransit's larger proposals, our Darawal link between the airport and Macarthur, effectively an extension of the Southwest Rail link as well at Leppington, also need to be supported from environmental and sustainability perspectives. Australian-built tram-trains are also key, and my colleague will talk about that more, although I would note it was, I don't know that this is in the plans or the knitting for this particular committee, but I pass regularly the Holsworthy forests as well, and to see the sheer scale of the Moorebank intermodal, it's quite staggering. And so I'm also highlighting that as being a real value for connecting the airport to the existing network. So my colleague will discuss other features of our position on the airport and the Bradfield development in more detail, but the transport planning principles here are clear and consistent. Extending the Sydney Trains heavy rail from Leppington is essential for developing a resilient and sustainable transport network for Western Sydney. These measures will support economic growth, improve connectivity, and contribute to a greener, more livable region. Thanks for your attention, and we look forward to discussing these EcoTransit proposals further.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Matt. We want to highlight the importance of extending the Sydney Trains Southwest Rail Link heavy rail from Leppington to Western Sydney Airport, and including Aerotropolis Bradfield Station, and also mention the substantial benefits of tram-trains to be introduced into this region. Firstly, again, just to re-emphasise that Sydney Trains heavy rail from Leppington to Western Sydney Airport Terminal Station is critical for creating an efficient transport network. This extension provides a high-capacity integrated link, including for the Aerotropolis Bradfield, to the wider Sydney Trains area, including Parramatta Central Station and Sydney Airport. This Sydney Trains heavy rail extension of the Southwest Rail Link enhances accessibility, reduces travel times, and has the real ability to reduce road congestion as the Western Sydney Parkland region grows. Also like to emphasise that digital signalling upgrades for all of the Sydney Trains networks ought to be fast-tracked, as this enables the same frequency as Metro at a fraction of the cost of Metro projects. However, to realise fully these benefits, we need additional infrastructure, particularly new parallel tunnels at Aerotropolis and Western Sydney Airport, as the current Metro tunnels, which are also designed for the smaller 3-carriage Metro services, cannot be shared with Sydney Trains. In addition to the heavy rail extension from Leppington, we advocate for the introduction of tram-trains, starting within the Aerotropolis and Western Sydney Parklands, also for the Science Park Luddenham, then later expanding across Greater Western Sydney. Tram-trains are versatile vehicles designed to operate on both traditional heavy rail tracks and lighter, dedicated tram lines. This dual functionality has multiple advantages, such as versatility, being that tram-trains can seamlessly transition between heavy rail, metro, light rail systems. This flexibility allows them to provide efficient regional connections and frequent local services in and within Aerotropolis and beyond in the Science Park, and also wider connections to Liverpool and surrounds. Enhancing connectivity within the Aerotropolis and the Science Park can be achieved through tram-trains by connecting businesses, residential areas, and the recreational spaces, thus having the great opportunity to reduce reliance on private vehicles and reducing road congestion. The sustainability and the cost effectiveness of this can't be minimised as well. Tram-trains assist reducing car dependency through its flexibility, its compatibility with new and existing rail lines, and thus has the opportunity to be more effective to reducing greenhouse gas emissions as well. And with the lowering of costs and the minimising of disruption, the integration of tram-trains into the wider network for transport in Western Sydney and Greater Sydney will also improve the quality of life for residents. Tram-Trains offers a convenient, eco-friendly travel option. So in conclusion, we advocate for extending the Sydney Trains heavy rail from Leppington to Western Sydney Airport and the introduction of tram-trains as an essential part of developing robust, sustainable transport for Western Sydney. These measures can support economic growth, improve connectivity, and assist with a more sustainable and livable future in the region. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Thanks very much for your very detailed submission as well. I'll start with a question and then hand over to my colleagues. It seems like such an obvious thing to have heavy rail going to an airport, and yet we don't have that in the plans for this particular airport. What's your understanding of why that is?
I could speculate, but I won't.
Oh, please do.
This way.
Why not? We all know what's going on.
Well, there have been occasions, such as the tunnels westward of Epping being built 40 centimetres too small for heavy rail trains, which does raise an eyebrow. But nevertheless, I won't be dabbling in those conspiracies today. I also find it difficult to fathom why the train northbound out of the airport precinct wasn't directed towards one of the two major train junctions on the Western Line, either Blacktown or Parramatta. That surely would have made a heck of a lot more sense. However, it's to an untutored mind, perhaps it does seem like there are transport planning bureaucrats who just like to put forks in the spokes of the existing network, and I won't talk about the motives for that.
Well, we should. Isn't it factual, if I can intervene, to suggest that Minister Constance didn't want trains with drivers on them who could be unionised? He didn't want trains that were subject to any trade union membership or action with their staff. And this is the whole origin and development of Metro, ignoring the fact that the benefit-cost ratio for extending Leppington to Badgerys Creek was much higher than this white elephant they built to St Mary's, and also the Leppington extension was cheaper.
There is that. It is a staple of transport planning principles, and I don't have a
it was about unionisation.
Yeah, but it's also a staple that the metros aren't put into greenfields areas. You build metros in high density locales. I'm not against building metro as an add-on to our current system, but I think I think I mentioned, we have the existing Sydney Trains network. We have the bones of a really good system. Paris has its metro, but it also on top of an RER. London has its overland Brit Rail, and then the London Underground. So the two things can work well together. But for reasons that I don't think are entirely pure, logical. That's a very straightforward way of putting it. I don't see that that putting a metro through these paddocks was a good idea in the first place. But that's what we have.
Yep. And if I may add, I'd like to quote Howard Collins from a Sydney Morning Herald article written by Matt O'Sullivan from 13 March 2019. I'll table this afterwards. Quickest, cheapest way to boost Sydney train services. And then Mr. Howard Collins says that it's not very sexy to sell to the public and politicians an improvement to existing lines, even though it could lead to a train turning up every 2.5 minutes and enhance safety compared to with cutting a ribbon on a new rail line. So arguably, extending the South West Rail Link from Leppington to Western Sydney Airport is a short extension on the existing system, but it lacks the new appeal of a metro train line that has been opened.
with the new carriages and with everything else that goes
Yes.
with that. So do you think it's the same problem that's led to, and I think when I was chairing the Transport Committee, I'm sure we had conversations about this, but that the lack of upgrades to our existing train line, like the one from Newcastle to Central, that with a few small tweaks could be twice as fast as it is now, but it's not seen as being something, as you said, not as you say, as Mr. Collins said, that you can cut a ribbon on, and so it's just never been the priority. Do you think it
Yes,
does come down to something that simple?
I think that is a rational
plays into
approach,
it.
yes. And extending the South West Rail to Leppington through Aerotropolis, Bradfield to Western Sydney Airport, it's a shovel-ready project, essentially. Largely that the intention of building the South West Rail Link in the first place, Glenfield to Leppington, was really a stage one for that furthering to Western Sydney Airport in its conception of the project idea as well, and included airport-to-airport travel.
Also made the point that if you drive along Camden Valley Way these days, to see a housing estate popping up every other week, Oran Park being the biggest and brightest, but it's the development along Camden Valley Way down to Narellan. I always understood it to be the South West Rail Link was just but stage one of pushing public transport into that part of the world.
Well, isn't it true that was the case up until 2015-16 when they got their hands on the so-called cities deal, and an arrangement was arrived at between the state and federal governments and cities ministers, most notably our state minister for Western Sydney, that all that planning would be junked, and notwithstanding the benefit-cost ratios, they were going to St Mary's for Metro.
I believe that to be the case.
That's what the history shows.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with where the corridors were reserved down towards Narellan, but I understood that to be the case, that there were even corridors that had been figured.
Well, there used to be a rail line that ran from Campbelltown to Camden through Narellan, but we're talking about the Leppington extension through Bringelly, Rossmore, and Kelvin Park to Badgerys Creek. And that work was underway to reserve those corridors until the cities deal, which was the turning point that's given us the gift to Celestino of a metro station, and metro being absurdly constructed through cow paddocks instead of residential areas where it could service commuters.
Yes.
That's just the plain truth of what happened. That's why one of the reasons we're here for this committee.
Any other questions?
So in terms of that whole, is it your evidence that metro configuration was conceived as a way to deunionise the workforce and cut a ribbon?
I'm not the person with the smoking gun evidence to say as much, but that is my clear understanding.
Yes, and if I may add to that, just reiterating what Matt and myself have said in opening statements, the current three-carriage metro, Western Sydney Airport Metro, three-carriage metro, has also the effect of limiting the expansion of the Sydney Trains network, because essentially, given the facts on the ground, or should I say below the ground with the tunnels being already dug and built at Western Sydney Airport and Aerotropolis, unless you actually we have new parallel tunnels at Aerotropolis and to Western Sydney Airport, you can't actually extend the Sydney Trains Leppington line, even if we wanted to, because the facts under the ground have locked out expanding Sydney Trains network under everyone's noses, essentially. Everyone's just thinking the airport's so good, it's up and coming, but beneath the surface, this is just
and there'd be sensible
falling by the wayside.
Sorry, so because of the tunnelling, you can't now extend the line even if you wanted to?
Those tunnels can't.
Yes, the tunnels
can't fit.
Yeah, they're too small.
Can't fit.
The Western Sydney Airport Metro tunnels are too small.
Existing Sydney heavy rail trains.
Right.
Yep. So even when I recall in budget estimates, Minister Halen said the other week that she was mode agnostic, or the government planning was mode agnostic. The Southwest, that corridor was still that business case was considering heavy rail and metro, either or. It's not locked in as either of them. That could only go as far as currently Aerotropolis, which is a station south of the actual airport itself. But then and I'm still in favour of extending heavy rail to Aerotropolis, but then that raises the question: if you're going to extend to Aerotropolis, everyone is going to have to get off from Western Sydney Airport to Aerotropolis, change at Aerotropolis, go out, say, Leppington line to Glenfield, and then change again at Glenfield if you want to get an express to Sydney Airport. Whereas if you do the new tunnels, you can actually get the heavy rail trains into the actual Western Sydney Airport directly under it.
How unusual is it for there to be a major airport internationally that doesn't have any sort of heavy rail going to it?
Well, that would be highly unusual, to have no heavy rail going to it. To have a metro in Heathrow is connected by the London Underground. But
you also have the express.
And it's not an entirely crazy scenario to have metro in conjunction with heavy rail, but to have no heavy rail connection, that would be unusual.
Yes, and also on that point about tunnels, I think there are continually a lot of other advocates that would suggest that a Metro West needs to be extended from Westmead onwards to Western Sydney Airport. Should also note the Metro West specifications are actually very different to also Western Sydney Airport Metro. So strictly speaking, we have the Western Sydney Airport Metro is actually a different type of metro, and if the Westmead to Western Sydney Airport Metro was actually that new line Parramatta extension would achieve, that would have required additional tunnelling at Western Sydney Airport anyway. Now, from my latest reading of the news, the state government is not proceeding with that. I'm happy to be corrected, but if there were already plans to build additional tunnels for the Metro West extension, but that's not now going ahead. But let's just flip it around and just build that new tunnelling for Sydney Trains at Western Sydney Airport and Aerotropolis towards Leppington. And also stressing that the Aerotropolis to Leppington station our proposal is above ground.
The other sort of major issue we've been looking at so far is in relation to the freight and the amount of freight that's going to be on the roads. Again, how unusual is that from a sort of international perspective to have an airport that is going to be significantly focused on freight? I think I read up to half of it is going to be, half of all flights will be cargo. How unusual is it not to have any sort of freight train link to an airport like that?
From my understanding, the Western Sydney Freight line is proposed to meet at just north of the Airport Business Park around Luddenham, and then goes across to about Yennora and then links into Leightonfield Villawood Yard with a freight connection there. I believe that is still quite some time away. And then with the EcoTransit proposal, from my understanding, some time ago, there was also a Western Sydney freight bypass. This is separate to the Western Sydney freight line going towards Yennora and Leightonfield. Previously, my understanding, from Kingswood down, near parallel to the Northern Road, there would have been a previous corridor that was earmarked for a Western Sydney freight bypass line. And then if that were to be established, it could integrate in with heavy rail, double deck, just south of Bradfield Station. And then it has the potential to run along a shared heavy rail, passenger and freight alignment south of Aerotropolis towards Oran Park, at Narellan. It potentially has the ability to split with the freight side going down towards Macarthur, whereas the passenger services would loop into Campbelltown Station. But the freight from Narellan, Macarthur would go down towards Southern Highlands. But then once we complete the Malden Dumbarton line, that could also loop in towards the Wollongong side, and which would alleviate a lot of freight running in through the centre or the more suburban areas of our Sydney Trains area network.
That's the Greens' rail transport policy right there, I think. How much does all that cost? Have you got some indicative numbers about it? You know, the Malden Dumbarton thing was partly built before Bruce Baird as Transport Minister candid in 1988. The out of Western Sydney orbital freight line was a victim, as I mentioned earlier on, of some electoral politics in the seat of Camden, where they're now saying they're going to put the road and the rail line underground from Cobbitty to Cawdor, which is incredibly expensive to do that. Have you got some numbers on what government would face, the billions involved in both those desirable projects?
I don't.
Happy to take it on notice.
Take it on notice.
Take it on notice.
And furthermore, the only thing that can save the St Mary's Metro White Elephant is to expand it, as Camden Council was saying, south to Macarthur Metro. But a lot of that is also tunnelling. You know, we're transport planning. We're a city of gophers now that go underground. Can you take on notice the cost of the Aerotropolis to Macarthur expansion of Metro, and some detail on how much of that is tunnelled underground? And I suppose once you get to St Mary's, there's a missing link, isn't there, north to Tallawong?
Tallawong. Happy to take it on notice.
Yeah, how much that costs as well, and how much of that is tunnelling, because that incredibly would take Badgerys Creek a long way around through Macquarie Park and Chatswood to Sydenham and Bankstown. What a journey. But that sort of in transport planning becomes what might be thought of as a missing link from St Mary's to Tallawong.
Yeah, happy to take notice. I think the Sydney Morning Herald had an article the other day when the Sydney Metro Review was leaked, and there was a figure for Metro between Aerotropolis and Oran Park. Right. And off the top of my head, I'll take a notice, but that might have been $5 billion or something.
Yeah, I think it's part of that. Some of the landholders, land developers, property developers, quite sensibly are saying it's so advantageous to their development and commuter amenity, they'd make the land available for these stations for free at Oran Park, certainly, and maybe elsewhere.
Oran Park, our view is that most of this can be built above ground where possible.
Or cut and cover.
Yeah, I think there's an above ground site at Oran Park that's been reserved, but obviously you're retrofitting tunnelling under the housing estates that have already been built.
Probably needs to be a little bit of tunnelling. Oran Park, a little bit Narellan needs to be underground, but otherwise,
okay. Well, that'd be very useful for the committee, I think. Thank you.
Any further questions? No? Okay, I think that concludes our session. Thank you. In relation to those questions taken on notice, and also any supplementary questions we might have for you, the Committee Secretariat will be in touch. But for now, that concludes our hearing for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.